So maybe can the TV 18 folks answer that question?
Yeah, they're all finished, and you can start whenever.
Okay.
That's why Andrew's the man. He knows all the answers.
Right. I was trying to look at the YouTube and it didn't seem to be looking live yet, but here we are.
Finished, and you can start whenever.
Okay.
Maybe can the TV answer that question?
Right. I was
Yeah,
trying
they're
to.
all
So I think
finished, and you can start whenever.
someone might need to mute their YouTube.
Sorry, that was me.
Right. I was trying to look at the YouTube and it didn't seem to be.
That is still not me.
That's Ian.
Ian, do you have your YouTube feed on?
I do.
Is it, can you mute it?
Muted?
Yes.
Well,
Might need to mute their YouTube.
Sorry, that was me.
oh,
Right,
thank
I
you.
was trying to look
Okay.
at the YouTube
That is still not me. That is still not me.
That's Ian.
That's me?
Ian, do you have your YouTube?
I do.
Is it, can you mute it?
Okay. How does one go about muting the damn thing?
So you can just close the YouTube, but there's a little speaker on the bottom left of the YouTube window, and if you click it, it'll cross it out and mute.
Yeah, or turn
It doesn't actually seem to be there. That's me?
I would just close the YouTube altogether.
Like a parallel universe.
All right.
Hey,
someone, if it goes through that
by
way,
popular acclaim.
people may get 2 approvals this evening instead of just 1.
I don't think I could handle it the whole.
I don't blame you.
All right.
Sorry
So
about that.
we are going to begin now the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for May 14th. I am going to read our remote script to get us going. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, the chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal. You're muted.
All right. Aye, Mark B. Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Ian Golding.
Aye.
Dave's not here. Maureen Phillips.
Present.
And Joe Topham.
Aye.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Present.
Joanne Dodd.
Yes.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. It looks like we have Art Gasparo,
Here.
Stephen Cohen,
Here.
Dan Bailey,
Here.
Whit Gifford.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission, we are convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by this recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. And for any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address questions and comments. And I have to add that we ask that you state your real name if you are asking questions or making comments on YouTube. And then finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Okay. So with that, we are opening the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for public comment.
Madam Chair, I opened that up on YouTube a couple minutes ago, and no one has responded that they are going to give any, so I don't think we have to wait too long.
Oh, perfect. Then we can move on. So the following items are continued. We have Chuck Rowe Nominee Trust at 25 Quays Road. That's continued until May 28th. We have Nantucket Point of View LLC at 9 Lincoln Avenue. That's continued until May 28th. Kim Glowacki at 46 Easton Street is continued until May 28th. Under request for determination, the Karen Alper Revocable Trust of 2005 at 1 Wamasquid Place and 49 Meadowview Drive is continued until May 28th. And with that, we will begin with Lottie Leshley, QPRT, and Jan Leshley, QPRT, at 65 Squam Road. I believe, Art, you're the representative for this one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the second public hearing for the referenced application, which is to upgrade the septic system within the buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetlands, both across the street as well as on Locust. We had continued the hearing waiting for a response from Natural Heritage, which we have received. This project represents a significant net benefit in terms of separation distance to groundwater. You can see on the plan the existing leach pit that's existed for some years, which would be replaced by an elevated mounded leach bed shown in red on the plan. And we'll also be adding a Septitech processor for enhanced nutrient removal. So, and there's no expansion of bedrooms. With that, I'd be happy to address additional questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions from the commission? Looks like no. Jeff, are there any questions from the public? Or can we open it to the public? It's looking like we have a light public right now.
It had been open and we haven't gotten any comments. Sorry about that.
So if there are no comments, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, Madam Chair, you do.
Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
Also move, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
And so motion by Mark, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
and Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Okay, so now we are moving on to Cindy and John Gallagher at 34 Washing Pond Road.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the applicant, Art Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering and Survey, along with Dan Bailey of Rackman and Sawyer. We are before you tonight with a notice of intent application for what is essentially a residential redevelopment project for the property located at 34 Washing Pond Road. We're applying for the application for work located within the buffer zone to Coastal Bank. You may recall that I was before the commission several months ago for this project, for this property, to remove the house that had been on the property. There also had been extensive patio and driveway areas. So the house has been removed. You have the essentially the landscape plan before on the screen in front of you. I've also included a detailed topographic plan which shows the area where the house had been removed. There is an existing open order of conditions which was for that house removal and the restoration of that area. We would like to permit the project that's before you and then use some of the excavated sand to fill that area in and sort of do this as a complete project. The shown in red on the plan in front of you is a 52-foot no build zone, and I'd like to briefly discuss that. According to the regulations in the area of the eroding coastal bank, we've provided the supporting CZM information for the long-term rate of erosion and calculated that setback, which is slightly larger than the typical setback of 50 feet. And you would note that we have actually exceeded that setback by a few feet. We're not pushing this right to the exact limit. The project includes the construction of what's essentially the secondary dwelling on the property. The main dwelling that you can see on the plan is outside of the jurisdiction of the commission. There's also a swimming pool proposed where only a corner of that structure is within the jurisdictional area, the northeast corner, and there's a fire pit and a patio proposed. We're also proposing some lawn area, which essentially is where the house used to be, which would lead with a path through the 25-foot buffer zone to a set of beach stairs to access the beach. You'll note on the plan that this 2 lots shown, this had been a single lot, and we had received approval through the Nantucket Planning Board for a division of this property, and it's also been through the land court. So we show both of the lots, but they're 2 lots at this time, and the development is proposed on the easterly lot. The grades, which aren't shown on the plan that's before you other than spot elevations, but are shown on the survey plan that I provided, show that all of the grading, both existing and proposed, lead away from the resource area. Essentially, the top of bank, the ridge is the high point, and the land slopes off back towards the road to the south. So any concerns with impervious surfaces or surface runoff are all running away from the resource areas. We believe the project as proposed clearly meets the protected interests and all of the performance standards. We have not requested any waivers. The only work within the resource area and no disturb zone is related to the beach stairs, which we believe constitute in typical practice a water dependent use. And in summary, that's the project, and we'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions from commissioners? Ian?
Madam Chair, I have several.
Okay.
First of all, in the letter to you, in the the second paragraph, where it says proposed activities at the site consist of constructing an existing single-family dwelling. There is no existing single-family dwelling there. So I was a bit surprised by the language. Secondly, I was out there this afternoon, and it was the Lorenzens' old house, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Really.
So I remember the family well. He was a window blind magnate out of Minnesota and made all Sears window blinds. And I worked on the house for 2 winters in the mid 80s, I guess. Anyway, and it was called Whispering Pines, and because they'd all succumbed to pine beetle, we used to call it Whispering Stumps. Anyway, neither here nor there. But I couldn't really figure out where this was going in relation to where the old house was, and I sort of am puzzled because it looks as though you're putting this covered patio and right in an existing dune field. So have you read the 2 letters from the abutters?
Are you asking me or are you asking
I
Art?
beg your pardon. I'm asking Art and Dan if they've read the letters from the abutters.
Art and Dan or Art, I think you have a response.
Yes. So I do apologize for the additional word in my write-up related to existing structure. That was a typo. I just made a mistake in terms of it shouldn't have said construction of existing single family. So we're referring to in terms of this application, the secondary structure, which I've referred to as a single family home, which fits into the DEP categories for filing fees and structures and that sort of thing. So that's why my intent, again, apologizing for any confusion, was that there is a proposed single family dwelling within your jurisdiction. In terms of the resource areas, we did a very, very extensive geologic survey of this area, brought in coastal geologists and have gone through and had a determination. That's why this is not a coastal dune. This is actually a coastal bank. And that determination was made as part of the previous filing. So the resource area boundary has been fixed and is determined as a coastal bank. We had some discussion at the previous hearing about this, which has to do with glacial sediments and as related to coastal bank and coastal dune delineations. So what's being proposed is within a buffer zone to the coastal bank. Shown on the plan is the black line shows the top of the bank, and then the 25, 50, and 100 foot buffer zones are in red. If you are out there, I have staked out these structures so I don't know if you probably, maybe without a key sheet to the numbers, it may not have been clear, or maybe it was, and that led to some confusion, but we have in fact staked the location of what's being proposed. And we have read the letters from the abutters, and personally, I find them without merit.
I'm sorry?
I find them without merit
Ah.
with respect to, the protected interests.
So I guess I wonder whether any of my fellow commissioners have been out there, 1. 2, from my observation, this map isn't particularly accurate. And in other words, the contour of the bank drops off pretty much vertically to the, well, not vertically, but fairly steeply to the beach. I'm surprised you have beach, low dune, and coastal bank sort of all, it doesn't look like what it looked like to me. And so I'd like a more accurate, drawing, including contours and an outline of where the old house was. And I also would like another opinion on the dune field, because I'm a bit surprised at that ruling. Thank you, Art. Thank you,
Art,
Madam.
do you have a response?
Sure. I agree. The plan that you may be looking at doesn't have all of that detail, but I would refer you to the site plan to accompany the notice of intent included with the application dated April 24th, 2020, which has all of the contours on it and was based on a current field survey. The landscape designers prepare, sort of one set of things, but for the plan that has my stamp on it, which you have, very, very clearly depicts existing conditions, the contours. I even have a note on there that shows the excavated area from the foundation that was there. I defer to you, Madam Chair, whether that's something that you want to have brought up on the screen, or if I should share my screen, or how you might want to do that. But again, the contours, we actually went out so as to be accurate for this filing and took topographic survey measurements of the hole that was left. And I've shown those contours on the plan that has been filed with you.
It looks like Joe has a question.
I'd love to see if Art could share his screen to get that site plan up, because we have had it before, and it'd just be great for this meeting now.
Yeah, I don't think the plan you're referring to is in our packet, Art.
Oh, okay.
It's not in our packet, Art.
Yeah. So maybe you could briefly share your screen so everybody can have a visual of what you're talking about.
Sure. Let's figure out how to do that. Share screen. Can everybody see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
So I've highlighted essentially the area that we're talking about. This was filed. I did file it after the initial filing, so I do apologize for any confusion that may have caused. But you can see on this plan the very detailed topographic information, which shows, as Mr. Golding referred to, the steep contours of the bank, the slightly lower dune or sand area that exists at the base of that bank, the coastal beach, the excavated area from the foundation, where that house used to be, and as that relates to the proposal. I think that also helps to show how the overall net benefit that really is on this particular property compared to what previously existed, where the next thing we might want to look at is the aerials of the extensive red brick patio and walls that were some 6 or 8 feet maybe from the top of this bank. And now you have all of your development that's being moved to greater than 52 feet away from the resource area. So and with extensive restoration that's going to occur for the landscape plan, there'll be a lawn area, but there's also a very large area that would be restored to match surrounding grade, and then planted with American beach grass.
So, Madam Chair?
Ian, yes.
Thank you, Art. Where it says excavated area from foundation removal to be restored, which is outside the 50 on this map. When I was out there, the lip of the excavated area from where the old house was seemed to be within 10 or 15 feet of the top of the bank.
Yes. If I may, you'll notice that the contour lines continue all the way up towards that word that says 25-foot buffer.
Yeah.
So you've got, and I don't know if the conditions have changed at all since, in the few weeks since I've done this plan. I know there's excavators on site. and they're doing work for the current order of conditions. But you can see that I actually, you know, those contours and that steep drop off do continue all the way up towards the green line, which is shown on this plan, is the currently approved limit of work. So we're working within, you know, that green line goes almost, because that's, you know, what previously existed. It may be helpful in the application on page, whether you want me to share it, since I have control of this at the time, I would just go down to show you the aerial that I included with the application. So this is what's been removed. And, you know, with all of the new development.
Art, are you trying to show us the aerial right now?
Yeah, does it not show?
It's not showing. We're still seeing the original.
Well, we have it on page 32.
Yeah, here we go. Now we can see it.
And that doesn't really correspond to the other one in terms of, it corresponds more to what I was saying about, you know, being right up practically to the edge of the bank.
Right, which is within the approved limit of work.
Art, I have a question for you, because I think part of the confusion, what we're seeing within the blue lines is now two separate properties. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
So I think that, you know, when we're looking at the aerial, you're looking at this larger picture, and then the new development is only on half of this. So it is a little bit skewed, I guess.
Sure, and we could certainly provide a plan that included, as was requested, the footprint of the previously existing house and patio, and be happy to do that.
Thank you, Art. It looks like Joe has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Art, can you add a dimension from the existing or the previous north wall to the new north wall? Just to say it's like 100 feet plus.
Sure.
Thank you.
Art, I think it might be time to stop sharing your screen, because then I can see if commissioners have questions. Awesome, thank you. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Mark?
Art, does the stairwell to the beach have to be 6 feet wide? Does that seem wide to you or not?
It does.
Okay.
I would suggest maybe a narrower staircase.
We can certainly, I can bring that back to the clients.
Because they, as you well know, they come and go. And on that North Shore, they do come and go quite a bit. So I think it should be a one that can be easily maintained as well as smaller, narrower, I should say.
We will, I'll talk to them about that, and we'll work that into a follow-up submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? I know, to Ian's point, I was slightly confused by seeing the terminology of high dune so close to the house. So that was a point of confusion for me. And Art, I appreciate your explanation, but I do kind of think that to Ian's point, maybe we need to look a little bit more into those resource area boundaries, because that is slightly confusing.
Sure. I mean, we can provide the, again, the information, you know, we brought in, you know, professional coastal geologists, and a very, very extensive study, which was done in order to, you know, fix these boundaries. And we could provide that information again.
Thank you, Art. Any other questions from commissioners before we open up to the public? Ian?
So Art, you feel the two letters are without merit, and Dan, as representing the client, you feel that you have no inclination to compromise in any way?
No, I mean,
all right, Dan.
The letters raise issues that, you know, I don't think technically they really exist. I mean, as Art has pointed out, this is a situation where almost the entirety of the work is outside commission jurisdiction. All structure has been pulled back outside of the 50. When I got involved, I was a little surprised that they had actually taken down the house before getting approval for a new house. Normally, the way that you would do this is you'd come in and you would say, we're going to move the house back, and you would demonstrate the environmental benefit all as part of one application. In this particular situation, the timing for that didn't work out. So the client decided to split it. But the point, as Art has made, is that this is a situation where a very large structure with a lot of impervious surface is being moved further back from the edge of the coastal bank.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Maureen?
Yeah, I had a question for you. Well, maybe you, Dan, or maybe Art. I wanted to, the prior structure had this large brick impervious surface, and now this new plan has, and I understand it's not within the resource area, the new plan has an extremely extensive, it looks like, stone surround to the whole house with almost, I'm just not sure. In terms of this being a positive for the resource area is one thing, but in terms of, we've got a very dynamic dune and frontage here. And so from a, planning point of view, I was wondering how, with the odds are good that this is going to erode more, that you've got so much impervious surface. It looks like, many times more than what it had been before. So I'd be interested to know what the difference in the impervious surface is. And then you mentioned the slope does go back away from the resource area, but it was a little hard to see. And maybe if we just go back, if I can get a chance to look at those other ones, the earlier drawings you did, but just how much of a slope is it, and is the is there any, and I guess, Dan, I mean, it just seemed very strange to me to see this extensive impervious surface, and is there, I think the general feeling, I think it's understandable to hear what the abutters said, and with their concerns about, the entire area, which obviously isn't in our jurisdiction, but it is still, a part of this island where we all live. So I was curious about why so much impervious area and what the difference in the two things are. And then, and I guess I just need to look at the slope more, but Art, I guess I'd like you just to confirm that you feel very comfortable with all that impervious area and the way the slopes go. That's one for you. And then Dan, just the kind of general question about, being a kind of more responsible resident, because you got structures that, a fire pit and a pool, and that's, I know they're not within the resource area, but I just really had trouble with this.
Art, can you answer about the resource area?
Yeah.
I think it may be helpful that we provide you with a comparison type of a table to show you how the changes in impervious areas and structural areas within each of the buffer zones from what existed to what's being proposed. I think that, we could have made this submission without showing any of the structure and just having the, element of the main house, excuse me. But we wanted to, show the show everything that is in fact being proposed. But the area of patio is, outside of the 50, going out to the 100. I really think that you can only, in terms of the commission and the protected interest in the jurisdiction, look at those areas that are within that buffer zone. And I don't find them, especially compared to what previously existed, to be looking at just those areas greater than, what previously existed, and certainly not, and certainly further away. In terms of the grades, the highest point of the bank is somewhere around elevation 32 up on that mound towards the easterly side, and you can see that we've included proposed spot grades around the pool of down around 23.5. So, I mean, that's almost 9 feet lower. The grade does get lower as you move to the west, but again, more like elevation, say 26, and we're down with the pool at 23.5. All so essentially positive slope away from the resource areas. But I'm hearing the concerns, and we will continue this hearing, and I'm sure that we're going to hear additional concerns from the abutters representative, and we will, we're happy to provide you this additional information. But I think the project more than meets the performance standards.
Thank you, Art. Mark?
Art, I had a question for you on the 100 to 50 foot area. Isn't a part of the pool and the fire pit under our jurisdiction to some degree?
Madam Chair, yes, they are, and that's why they're included in the application. And that red line is they're within the 100, but quite the fire pit. I can give you an exact distance, but just eyeballing it, it's some 80 feet away.
Well, I'm just concerned that I echo Maureen's thoughts about there's so much real estate being covered with the stone patio on both the east and west side of the pool, and a little in front and a lot behind it. I think that the owners and you all might want to rethink the amount of coverage there to get us to bless the area that's within the 100 to 50 foot area. That's my thought anyway.
I mean, and again, I don't want to, be argumentative in any way. But, these typically you could be all the way down to the 25-foot buffer zone with, these types of elements. And at such a great distance away, I think the question becomes, in terms of protected interests, how are, the interests protected by the commission adversely affected by a patio located so far away from the bank with a grade that slopes away from the resource area. That being said, I don't think need to belabor the point. We can work to further support that position and try to address the comments that we have heard.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you, Art. Joe?
I think once we get Art's plan showing where the existing house was and where everything is pulled away, like Dan Bailey said, if we did it all in one application, I think we would have seen like the net benefit of what they've done here. So I'm not as, I don't have so much of a problem with the stone patio that's outside of our jurisdiction. I do think there's some things in there but it's compared to what was there originally and for how many years, I think this is a better plan than what we would have seen. I'm kind of glad that they pulled it so far back, but I really think Art's plan in 2 weeks is going to really spell out what a benefit this project has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners?
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, but having been out there, and I would like Jeff, a question to Jeff, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is especially if we looking at the aerial, clearly the original house, which was greatly expanded, was plumped in an area where it never would have been allowed in this day and age, in what it would have appeared to have been a dune field. And so I wonder whether we could have an independent expert to read the geological survey, as I assume that it was commissioned by the applicants.
Jeff, do you have a
I'm
response?
really baffled that it's not, that it's.
Sure. So if I may, I mean, that was something that came in under the original application and we looked at pretty extensively and kind of kicked around. I think one of the things that we always get confused with sometimes with coastal dunes, not only looking at the parent geology that's there, but also needing to remember that both the state and local regulations that coastal dunes are landward of coastal beaches. And in situations where we look at something like a coastal bank separating what appears to be a dune field from the coastal beach, DEP, and there's some case law behind it that doesn't view those as coastal dunes because they're not essentially touching the coastal beach and exchanging sand with the coastal beach, which they're supposed to be doing. So when we looked at that site and kind of went around, I'll even talk about when we did our site inspections to look at the geology across the whole site. We ended up getting permission from the land bank to even go onto their piece of property, which is even further west, to see if that dune field connected to the beach separate of the bank and formed kind of a dune field that connected back around. Sorry, I'm making a lot of hand gestures that no one can see for illustration, but it was something we looked at pretty extensively. I mean, I'm sure we can have someone look at it again. We use a coastal geologist to do all of our SPPF review, and we can probably talk to him if he'd like to take a look. But I know when we did that delineation the first time, I think we felt pretty comfortable with it and spent a great deal of time reviewing it and making sure that it met the regulatory standards for beach, dune, or bank. So we're happy to go in whatever direction you wish, but that was kind of our initial review on that resource area.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Ian, do you have a follow-up?
Do I? Well, no, I don't feel like contradicting Jeff if he's, satisfied. I'd like my fellow commissioners to make a point of getting out there in the next 2 weeks to have a look, if they haven't seen it already.
I'll be perfectly honest, Ian. We tried really hard to make that into a coastal dune. I mean, lots of up and downs, and any spot where we thought that slope got over the bank and dealing with it. I mean, trust me, we try to make as many areas jurisdictional as we can. So I don't think it was for lack of effort, but I think that the geology just didn't really hold up in that connection. That direct connection was just not really present. So a couple years it may be. I don't know.
So I just have a comment, and then Joe, I'll go to you. So I see this as somewhat of a net benefit, moving the old house, getting rid of it. And now the development, is outside of the 50, although I find the amount of stonework nauseating personally. It's something that we generally allow under our regulations. What concerns me, though, is the subdividing of this property, because I'm worried that what's kind of been sold as a net benefit, moving one house out of like the coastal bank out of the 25, now we might have two giant developments on what was one property. So Art, can you speak to that? Because that is a major concern for me.
Sure. Any development on the other lot has to come before the commission and meet your performance standards. And, you very routinely allow for the development of property that has structural elements between the 50 and the 100-foot buffer zone, landscape elements between the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones. And I don't see this as any different in terms of as long as the protected interests are not adversely affected by the development, the work is being done in full compliance with your regulations. If there's, what I wouldn't expect is that somebody is going to come in on that property and expect that a waiver is going to be granted by the commission to allow a structural element within that 50 or 52 foot buffer zone, or for a patio within the 25. And likewise, we've approached this application in the same manner. So while there were all of these structural elements within an area that they potentially could have come to you and said, there's a net benefit by reducing, as you see quite often, X square feet within the 50-foot buffer zone, but keeping some amount. These folks have actually come to you with a proposal that is completely compliant with your regulations. And if somebody does that on the other lot, that's why the regulations exist. And I think that would be perfectly fine with no expectation of waivers to be granted by the commission. And while we talk about net benefit, I think that net benefit is even greater because it's being essentially achieved without the granting for giving anything back.
Thank you, Art. Jeff, I'm going to bring this up during commissioners' comments, but I do think it's time that maybe we as a commission address the planning board about properties being subdivided within wetland resource areas, because I think it's an ongoing problem for us. Yeah.
Sure, we can certainly have that as a topic of discussion onto a future agenda, and maybe sending them a letter or trying to set up a joint meeting or something. We can definitely arrange that, though.
All right, thank you. Joe, do you still have a question?
No, I'm all set now.
Were you out, Art?
And just one comment to the dune is that, you know, the write-up which I included in the original application and the description, it's not that it's not a dune, it's a clifftop dune, it's not a coastal dune. And so there's differences that exist there in terms of the regulations, and there is policy guidance from CZM and DEP, which, as Jeff referred to, you know, was looked at and was followed for how those determinations are made in terms of what is in fact a regulatory area. So it's not a coastal dune is the distinction.
Thank you, Art. If there are no more questions or comments from commissioners, we'll open it up to the public.
So I'll go before Whit starts talking really quickly. So we had one public comment from Chip Shore, and he just wanted to say that he was in a butter and he was one of the ones that sent a letter to the commission, and that Whit is there to represent him and will also answer any questions. So I thought that would be a good lead in to Mr. Gifford providing some comment.
Okay, Whit, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Jeff, for the lovely segue. Chip Shore is your direct abutter immediately to the east of the proposed project. And quite frankly, the one question that seems to be hanging out there is, with this huge chunk of impervious surface, all the way from the front of the new house down through the pool, through the kitchen, through the spa to the fire pit, where's that runoff going to go? There are no drainage structures shown on the plan. I can't imagine they want it sloping back into the house. The other question is, the design shows two subterranean parking areas underneath the main house and a smaller one underneath the what Art is calling a second dwelling. I think it's more of a glorified cabana. You're going to be parking your Mercedes underneath, and in a rain event, where's that water going to go? I think the point that Art made was that, yes, the vast majority of this is not in the resource area. However, if they shrunk the big old stone patio, they could conceivably get the pool and an awful lot of the fire pit out of your jurisdiction, and achieve the somewhat of the same net effect of having a patio and a pool and a fire pit, maybe if they moved it to another place. The other question is what happens to the runoff from the pool? If you have to drain it, or, you know, it's not town water, it's got to go somewhere. Given the topography here, I would like to see if Art can add a drainage structure or just some address somewhere where that runoff is expected to go. The stairs to the beach, we've got a situation here where the Gilwilly property had and has a perfectly functioning set of stairs now. It's currently in common ownership. With a relatively simple easement, that stair could serve both of these lots. And that would obviate the need to do much of anything within the resource area on this particular portion. Whether it's 6 feet or smaller on the size of the stairs, maybe we don't have to address that because we could share the stairs that are there. And I think the chairman's point is a good one. You're only looking at half the picture here. You've got this one half, and as much of this is out of the jurisdiction is a wonderful thing, but there's no guarantee that the person who's going to buy or build on the next lot is going to follow any of the same strictures and restrictions that may apply here or come in and ask you for waivers. And I think, again, if the water on the runoff from this huge patio is going to go anywhere, it's probably headed in that direction. So you're compounding that action that, yes, it's not within the jurisdiction, but the effect could be within the jurisdiction. For those reasons, we'd love to see the whole thing scaled back, keep it to one set of existing stairs and trim it all back.
Thank you, Whit. Art, would you like to speak to any of those points?
I would certainly, though I noticed that Mr. Beal had a comment. Would you rather I respond now or after Commissioner's comments?
Mark, would you like to ask your question or comment?
Through Whit, from the chairman, through Whit, where is the staircase that exists now? I can't see it on the aerial photograph.
If you go to the, and Joe, if you could.
I've blown up the aerial and I don't see staircase there.
It's on the aerial, but it's better shown on the plan that shows both lots.
Page 30.
The landscape plan.
I don't know if that could be brought back up on the screen or not.
Page 30 of our packet. Oh, and here it comes.
That's a wonderful one that shows the incredible amount of stone, but that's not necessarily the one, Joe, that I was thinking of. The one, yeah, there we go.
There it is.
If you can see the stairs that appear on the left.
Oop, they're gone now.
Up, if we scroll back up again, there we go. Those set of stairs over on the left exist. And I don't know, Joe, whether it made it in time to make the package or not, but the photographs that were taken from the beach looking back up show that those stairs are perfectly functioning stairs as they exist now.
Thank you, Whit. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Art, now would you like to respond?
Sure. In terms of the drainage, the runoff, the impacts to the resource area, again, you know, the sunken patio, the driveway areas that are all brought up, they're all out of the jurisdiction. And then the areas of impervious surface, and even just the corner of the pool, which is in the buffer zone, the regulations protect the resource area, not the buffer zone. So how would what's being proposed negatively impact the resource area protected by the commission? It doesn't. I mean, it's the runoff that's going to lead on a property of this size is all going to the south. It's not going to, it's physically impossible for it to make it to the coastal bank resource area. So I fail to see how there's an impact other than that somebody wants their neighbor to do something else.
Thank you, Art. Jeff, were there any other questions from the public?
I am not seeing any, Madam Chair, but let me just double check again. I'll do a quick refresh to make sure I'm just not missing it.
Okay.
No, I don't have any other new ones.
Looks like, Joe, you have a question or comment?
So I am kind of surprised that we have spent so much talking about something outside the resource area. I mean, it's a little dizzying that, listen, I get it. There may be someone that's appalled by the amount of stone, but it's out of our jurisdiction. You almost have to take your hand to the 100-foot line and look up. Don't go down. Don't worry about the house. Don't worry about anything. And I think if any water is going to come down towards the street, Washington Pond Road, the homeowner is going to see erosion. He's not going to want to have that. He's going to plant it. He's going to take care of that. But that's outside of our jurisdiction. The pool drainage, we have that in our bylaws. We're going to say like that the pool water is going to be taken in a truck, taken out to the sewer beds, and it's going to get dumped. So all these problems are not really problems because we've already like been so far ahead of this in pool drainage and other problems. You just have to look for the 100 feet and look forward. And I agree with Art that this client is pulled so far back and the amount that's within the 100-foot area is minimal. I mean, it's compared to what the footprint was there, it's almost nothing. And I think if Art could show like we have, 100 square feet of that's within that zone, and we originally had 4,000 square feet. I mean, I don't understand how we're not seeing a benefit. Could we say the stairs could make one and share it? Well, that's great, but we're seeing more and more people come back to us and saying, we're not getting along with a neighbor and we don't want to share the stair. I'd like to see one stair, but that's great. And that's a great idea, but I don't know if their client's going to want to do that. But I just kind of surprised that we spent so much time talking about something outside of our jurisdiction, because if we deny it or we want to disapprove this, town council is going to say, I can't win this case. This is ridiculous. You guys are saying your personal beliefs about a patio that we don't control. And the other patio that is open that connect from the pool surface to the secondary dwelling, those are all individuals. There's a lot of grass that's going to be in between there. I mean, it's not like it's one surface that's, poured on a concrete slab. It's going to be open. There's going to be grass in between there. It's open space. It's going to be green. Maybe the landscape architect can add some color to the picture. I also think Art's plan coming in with topography showing which way the grade is going to show, or even show lines that say the drainage is going to go towards Washington Pond Road. It's no different than what was there before as far as the drainage. It's going to be the same thing. And I think that this client may even add some more, vegetation to help this problem. So, I'm sorry, Art, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come back next week with this information, but I'm kind of frustrated that we're at this point right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I don't think they have a file number, so they were going to have to come back anyway unless they got one.
So we're happy to provide as well, either way, updated plan, a chart that shows this information. I hear the comments and concerns and of the commission, and we'll provide you some additional information. We're happy to do that.
May I just add to my learned friend's spirited defense of the process?
Yeah, but I do think we do need to focus on the resource area boundaries and impact.
Our resource area goes out to 100 feet. And we have often asked, especially with driveways, that they be porous rather than asphalt. And so I just want to put that in there, that, we've always asked people to bear that in mind in these situations.
Thank you, Ian. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Jeff, is our public still quiet?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Art, would you like to continue?
Yes, to the 28th, please.
Okay, so this will continue until May 28th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to certificate of compliance. We have Andrew O'Brien and Sonia Anderson, trustees, 13 C Street.
Yes. Hello, Madam Chair. This is for, sorry, just to hop in. Oh, glad Joe brought it up. This was for the construction of a stairway and elevated walkway, and it is constructed in compliance. And I apologize, I grabbed the wrong piece of paper there for a second. And we are recommending that that certificate can be issued with ongoing condition 19, that the applicant provide photo monitoring of that site to demonstrate that there's not any adverse impacts to the vegetation in the marsh there.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? Joe?
It says it has a 60% light penetration, but it looks like it's all built with wood, not the mesh that we approved. I mean, if you bring up some of the photos, Joanne, can you slide down to the photos? Please.
I don't think I have them on my desktop.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Art?
So there's two sections of the walkway. The first part, and it's labeled on the plan as timber, is planks, and then it transitions for the part that is over the marsh to be the fiber grate. And perhaps from the angle of the photos that I took, that might not be clear. But there's a transition point there where it goes from planking to fiber grate.
Thank you, Art. I don't know what page it is in our packet, but I can see that photo. Oh yeah, there it is.
45.
See the gray versus the gray is the fiber grate.
All right, I thought the fiber grate was the whole walkway.
No, there's a change in resource areas at that boundary. So
Okay.
that's why the plan is, maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been on the labeling on the plan with the different leaders as to where that transition occurred. But that was per the approved plan.
Thank you, Art.
Sorry, I wasn't very clear in my explanation either.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? If not, is there an order to, or excuse me, a motion to issue the certificate with ongoing condition 19?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that moves us on to orders of conditions. And will we start with Hulbert Act 2 LLC at 4 Hulbert Avenue?
Yes.
Okay. That is SE 483298 for those of you pulling it up from your email.
It's not good.
You want
Sorry,
me to
I was
share
doing
it,
that,
or-
and now my email is not working, so we'll have to do our best.
No, let me go on mute. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. So this was for the project that Paul Santos presented last week. That was just the elevating of the existing structures on that lot. And then that by raising those up, they're having to slightly modify the existing deck and stairs to then reach the ground. but they weren't proposing any change. As a reminder too, the lot that we have worked on next door was the one where they had the tree species that were in question for a while. That is not on this lot. That is a totally separate one. So when we had the questions about hornbeam and white oak and all those things, that was separate. So I couldn't really think of any conditions for this one, but that's what I have.
Thank you, Jeff. It looks like Seth has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe there was a discussion about adding the lighting condition into this if the house was getting raised, just making sure that the lighting is still directed down and away from the wetland.
Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we can certainly add another condition that would simply read that all exterior lighting is to be directed downward and away from the vegetated wetland. I don't want to say down and away from the resource area because the other resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that would be confusing. So we'll leave it at that, but we can certainly add that.
Any other thoughts from commissioners?
No.
So then is there a motion to approve as amended?
Motion to approve is amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that brings us to Lottie Leshley, QPRT, and Jan Leshley, QPRT at 65 Squam Road.
Yes, so this was for the septic system upgrade, kind of in kind, I guess is the best way to put that. The only condition that we had put into this was that they are required to provide all of the reports that the Board of Health gets to the commission. And that's kind of our standard IA septic system condition. But other than that, didn't really have anything.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions or thoughts from commissioners?
No.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then that moves us on to other business, approval of minutes from April 30th, 2020. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
I did, and I'm sort of misquoted on page 204, which is part of the 300 Pulpus Road Caleb Cressman application. And I'm quoted as saying, wait a second, have I got page 205, sorry. Shall I get in touch with Terry about it, or shall I say something about it right now?
I would say it right now.
Okay, so I'm quoted as saying, just before Jeff Blackwell asked for a continuance, I'm quoted as saying, Deanne Atherton's comment states the property was owned by the same family since 1978. The family was very casual in its approach to wetlands. He doesn't think the contractor has the whole onus of what is there. I actually said that I didn't think that Caleb Cressman, the applicant, had the whole onus. And I didn't say that. I said the previous owners before the owners that currently own it were rather casual. So I'm not sure how to correct that. And I don't know whether that's important, but I would like to see contractor changed to either the applicant or Caleb Cressman. Please. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Any other thoughts on the minutes?
I'll move for approval as amended.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips? Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, Terry, for the minutes.
Like Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
And that brings us to discussion of SBPF 87 to 105 Baxter Road for template maintenance.
Well, Stephen and Dwight are coming on here, and not to steal any of their thunder, just a little update from our end, based upon the authorization for work at the last meeting that involved regrading on the site with the material on the site, and then a follow-up inspection from us, and then authorizing them to then start the cleanup and the 85 Baxter, kind of that sand delivery area, and where 85 Baxter used to have a house and has been eroding and contributing bricks and pipes and all the fun stuff that used to be there. We did that inspection. So we did conduct a field inspection of the entire template after they had regraded. Didn't find any debris in that section of template, both on the top and the bottom. And we did say that they could begin to do the cleanup work starting at 85 Baxter Road to start picking that debris up. And we're waiting for that work to conclude. And then we'll be back for the third phase of authorized work back to you guys with the report from there. But they just finished that work up at the end of last week and into this week. So I guess we'll wait and see if they have a further update on that cleanup effort. But the first phase of that work was completed satisfactorily. So I'm happy to report that. And I'll turn it over to those guys if you guys want.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Steve, would you like to start?
Oh,
Dwight.
yeah.
Dwight,
I'm just going to comment that Jeff stole our thunder. That's what I was going to report on, that the first phase was done. Second phase, that was approved. Second phase, I believe the contractor said they're going to be starting that next week. And it should take about a week or so to take care of 85. And once that's done, we'll have Jeff inspect it and continue to move on to number 3 as long as step 2 is all set. So that's the update on the maintenance.
Okay. Are there any questions from commissioners about the maintenance or what's been going on?
Oh,
yes, Jeff.
I will add too, is I did meet with, I won't even try his last name because I will say it wrong, but I did meet with, you see his name on daily reports occasion, with Ali on the site as well, and walked the template once with him. They're continuing to do the regular inspections for debris as it shifts around from wind and whatever. And we talked pretty extensively about what he's doing. And as he's one of the people doing inspections, it was kind of nice to walk the template with him and get kind of his insight on how he does it. And we talked about it, but they're continuing to do that work. So while we still check on it at least every few days for what's going on, having gotten to speak with him directly, I feel comfortable with his ability to inspect that site as well. So that was nice to be able to do with our masks on and 6 feet apart. So
thank you, Jeff. If there are no questions from commissioners, Jeff, are there any questions from the public about the template maintenance?
no one has put anything up as of yet.
Okay.
So I think we're probably okay to move on. And if something comes up, we can certainly
do it. As an aside, Terry says she got your correction. So
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so if there's nothing to discuss for this, we'll move on to discussion of SBPF 77 through 122 Baxter Road. and 65 through 67 Baxter Road.
Yes.
Reading that correctly.
Would you like a little intro from me on that, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think that might be good.
All right. So what has brought this up is when we were doing all of the work and kind of what originally kicked off some of the sand delivery issues in that area for the Sconsa Bluff, we had looked briefly to the properties at the south and had brought some issues to the commission's attention that were, I think, for at least from my end, and I'll fess up, is I got caught up in the geotube area and hadn't properly dealt with the area to the south. And the Coastal Conservancy, through the letter that they sent in, has asked the commission to relook at that again. Hopefully everyone got a chance to read their letter. I know that's something that from a staff level we'll be looking in addition as well, to make sure that those are in compliance with those two a bit older permits from the 1600s, but 1600 permit series. But those outstanding permits, and would like the opportunity to come back and kind of give a formal written report from a staff level on that. But those permits are currently held by SBPF, so I don't know if, not to put them on the spot, if Stephen or Dwight have any comments they'd like to add to this, or if you guys have any comments. But I think now that we seem to have the geotubes on a path of getting corrected, looking back at this area would probably be very prudent to do.
Thank you, Jeff. Dwight or Steve, do you have any comments on this?
I think just in general that, I don't know if we agree with a lot of the information in there, but we're happy to work with the commission if Jeff reviews it and finds that there are any questions of any specific information. I do want to say that the sand that was featured in there, I think we've already established was not SBPF sand. There was no delivery in June when that was delivered. And that, if there are inconsistencies in permits, some of those are individuals and some of those are SBPF, but we think that we're in compliance now with the order of conditions and the enforcement orders. We're happy to stay that way and happy to work with Jeff and the commission to make sure that anything that needs to happen happens.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions from commissioners about this? Jeff?
So not that I have a question, but I think what I would like, Madam Chair, if possible, if we could kind of carry this as an agenda item to the meeting on the 28th, and we'll try to get you kind of updated photos and a description and make sure everyone gets copies of those two orders of conditions too, and kind of put together a little packet of information for that and kind of some current on the ground conditions and kind of a analysis of the order of conditions for you guys to review and discuss on that 28th meeting, as long as the agenda isn't like 10,000 items long. So we should have possibility to do that. We have a little bit more time now that our focus at the Natural Resources Department isn't back to work plans for our department and some other on-island industries. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more time for commission business too.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good to continue this with more information for next meeting. So if there are no questions, Jeff, there were no questions from the public on this one, were there?
I haven't seen any. So I requested public comment 3 or 4 minutes ago, at least. So
okay.
I think that's there.
So we will continue this discussion at our next meeting, May 28th. So with that, we are moving on to discussion of annual town meeting 2020, Article 97, the proposed glyphosate ban. I'm hoping everybody had time to look at some of this information in the packet. I know, Seth, yeah, you kind of wanted to spearhead this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate it getting put on the agenda and the staff, including the information I sent into the packet. That being said, I think at this time, we can probably table this discussion because after listening to the joint select board and finance committee hearing on Tuesday, it sounds like it's the intention of those boards to not hear any citizen warrant articles at the 2020 annual town meeting. They're trying to reach out to all the petitioners to get them to move their articles possibly to a special town meeting in the fall, or possibly not even to be heard until next year. So since this isn't going to be heard for several months to possibly a whole year, I don't know if we need to spend the effort on the discussion right now.
Okay. Any thoughts from other commissioners just on the information presented? Ian?
Well, not on the information. Thank you, Seth. I look at this as being in part a political, a political issue, and I would be more comfortable with Seth asking for an amendment when it comes up for town floor, rather than us getting involved as a commission. So I'd like to ask my fellow commission members to consider that aspect of it, because we depend on public support, and so I would urge us to think twice before getting involved in what is a very controversial issue. So, but
Yeah.
Seth, I take your point totally.
Seth, do you want to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, without getting into the substantive information here, I agree with Ian that this is a controversial article that I have for several years personally been taking a position on. My intention with bringing this to the commission is whether we feel as a commission that it is prudent to take a organizational opinion on this or not, whether that's to support the article or oppose it. And if the decision is we just don't want to take an official position on it at all, that's fine with me. I just wanted to bring it up in case we do feel like it is our role to take a position, given that glyphosate has significant potential as a tool to do management of invasive species in wetland resource areas. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not going to stand here and I don't really want to debate the too much of the intricacies of what we think the risk and harm of that chemical is. It just to see if we want to take an official position or not. And if not, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. Maureen?
Yeah, I have my worry about this is that this is to me, this is an instance where science is being politicized. And it's kind of like to me, it reminds me of the vaccine controversy, where somebody gets the bit between their teeth about something that there isn't scientific support for, and then it kind of people pile on it in a political way. I mean, I think it certainly could be in a leadership role for us in some way to support the science here, and this is part of the area that the impact of substances on resource areas on the whole island. And I think taking a stand, if we all decide this is that we agree with this science, I think that would be important to do. So I would generally be in favor of doing this once we get to where it makes sense to do, and people have a, if everyone agrees that they feel the science is strong enough and that we could take a position that way. But I would be in favor of that kind of action. So.
I know from my perspective, I have mixed feelings about taking action as a commission on this. I see glyphosate as an important tool in some of our invasive species management, but I also see glyphosate products widely abused on this island and not being regulated at all. I mean, I had a landscape company 2 weeks ago rounding up a driveway in 30-mile-per-hour winds, and they claimed the sprayer had a pesticide license. Without anybody to be checking pesticide licenses locally, it makes me nervous how often a chemical like this isn't applied correctly. So I can see where citizens would want to propose an article, and I would rather stay out of that, the politics of that. Jeff, you had a comment?
I'll let Seth go first.
Okay, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I certainly understand where everyone's coming from, and I do think that there is significant misuse of glyphosate. My point here is that my basic point, without getting into the specifics, is that a ban, first of all, under the current state laws, is not legal. So that's one thing, but it's also not helpful. I totally support some type of better regulation or better registration, or allowing only licensed pesticide applicators to have access to glyphosate rather than just anybody being able to buy it at Marine or whatever. I mean, you can still order Roundup on Amazon, so there are issues there. But making a ban on a known known product that has been used successfully for invasive species management for many, many decades is only going to force people to use additional products, some of which might be more detrimental both to the safety of the applicator and to the resource area itself. So I just don't think a ban is the way to get at this issue. I'm all for better use. And I think that every management tool, whether it's a chemical management or physical management or prescribed fire or whatever it is, everything has some risk associated with it and some reward. But the way that this article and the article that was presented last year at town meeting as well have been written don't consider the whole scope of the issue and aren't going to get the intended effect that people are thinking of. We're going to ban glyphosate and all of a sudden pesticides aren't going to be used on Nantucket. That's not what's going to happen. So that's why I'm pretty against this this wording of the article.
Ian, I guess, and then Jeff.
Well, this is why I suggested to Seth that he make that as an amendment when it comes up before town meeting, and it can be discussed at town meeting. And Maureen, before you were on the committee, this was quite an issue for a while, going backwards and forwards with Ernie Steinar and myself. And I produced a number of documents from the European Union and scientists in Europe mostly, who do not agree with many of the scientific papers that have been funded by the manufacturers of glyphosate. And without going over this well-trodden path, I'd be happy to send you some links. And of course, there has been a case decided in California which looks as though it may bankrupt Bayer. And so, but again, I agree with Seth that, there are uses for it. But I would rather that we didn't get the commission involved in this personally, but thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things that gets to the heart of this a little bit is how glyphosate is regulated by the state. And to those ends, both the public health director, Roberto Santamaria, and I have both petitioned the state multiple times in writing to gain the ability to aid in their enforcement on Nantucket, because right now we're really only subject to the state inspectors actually coming to Nantucket. And the number of times that they are here is shockingly low. And the fact that the state right now only has 3 inspectors for the whole Commonwealth should give you kind of an indication on what level of inspections that they're doing. So that may be, if the commission doesn't want to take a position on the article, and I totally understand that, is it may be something that if the commission does, maybe provide some support in petitioning the Department of Agriculture to have some ability for us to do some sort of enhanced policing or enforcement, or just to help them out, or any of those things. That may be something that the commission is maybe more able to do without the same level of controversy or disagreement, as a potential way to deal with this as well. So just as a kind of food for thought, and I think I'd be happy to try to, when we're not dealing with COVID to the same degree, maybe get Roberto to participate in that conversation too. He's a little tied up at the moment, but I think he'd be happy to talk to you guys as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
I agree. I think we should support Jeff and Roberto in petitioning the state. I think that's really smart. I also agree with what you said, Ashley. I just think that Joe Homeland is just spraying it anywhere willy-nilly, and I think there needs to be some guidance on how that does that. It's controlled and how it's being used, almost like a fertilizer license or something like that. I don't think as a commission we should weigh in. I do think that Seth, this is very passionate for you. I think as a concerned citizen, you should stand up and amend some the way the article is written, or even go to the person that is sponsoring the article and see if you can't get to them now. And if not, then they know you're going to be coming forward. But I think that would be a really smart move. And that's about all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have been in communication with the article sponsor, and I was in communication with the sponsor of the article at last year's meeting as well. So there's that back and forth. I understand here we're a regulatory committee. We're not an advocacy or advisory board. So if we don't want to take up kind of an advocacy position, and I'm just going to do it as a private citizen, that's fine. The only reason I brought it to this commission is because we carry a certain weight in our decisions, and having a backing of Conservation Commission could potentially be valuable in how we move forward with this issue. But I don't think it's worth the time and effort to try to convince everybody on this board to share my opinion. I wouldn't want to convince everybody to share my opinion anyway. So if we just want to leave it at that, that's fine. I like Jeff's idea of participating or helping the state and town get better enforcement here. That makes sense. And just, if I may, in response to Ian, I completely understand that what I've provided is very much a summary document. There are thousands of peer-reviewed papers on glyphosate across multiple contexts: agricultural, invasive species, microbiology, you name it. And so I understand that there is differing research as to the ecological and human health potential risks of glyphosate. I don't think that the science is entirely decided. I think from what I've seen is that with proper use, most of the risks can be mitigated. And again, I mentioned this in my my submission as well, but there is a lot of confusion about the chemical glyphosate itself versus the interaction with surfactants that are added. Some of the issues, especially in the case you referenced with Roundup, has to do with surfactants. So I think that there needs to be, you know, yeah, I mean, it's a polarized issue, and the science is kind of still not decided on everything, but there is a lot of research out there saying that when used properly, the risks can be generally minimal. That's my personal opinion. Not everyone has to take that opinion, but that's just where I'm coming from here.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Well, as Seth brings up surfactants, and of course, when I was doing a lot of research on it online, I have minimal scientific background. I was surprised how little research there was on individual surfactants. So it's a very good point as part of that overall picture.
No, that tends to be the problem with Roundup, actually, is the surfactants, as Seth was saying, and not glyphosate. But either way, I agree that I think it would be a good idea for Jeff to work maybe with the commission to send a letter to the state as far as trying to have better regulatory authority with pesticides locally.
So if I may, just maybe a recommended course of action is we'll put that together for sure. But if people want to kind of revisit this, we could kind of blanketly say that when the select board and the moderator announce that we're going to have a town meeting that includes citizen warrant articles, we can put this back on the agenda like 30 days before town meeting and then kind of revisit it from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good course of action.
Since we don't really know when that's going to be.
All right, so if there are no other thoughts or comments from commissioners, we'll move on to committee reports. Crack?
No.
Didn't meet.
No.
CPC?
Done.
Then NP and EDC?
Didn't meet either.
Okay, and there's no other, so that brings us to commissioners' comments.
Yes, I have a question for Jeff, which is who has authority over fish release into ponds? Anybody?
Fish release?
Yes.
Yeah, that is through the Department of Fish and Wildlife through the state.
Okay.
Unless it's an estuary like Long Pond, and then that may also be regulated by the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Okay.
But if you have a specific pond or question or issue, if you just email it to me, I'm happy to get you in touch with the relevant person that you need to, because I have contacts for some of those.
Okay. I mean, 1,000 trout have been released recently into Maxie's and Washing Pond. So,
that is the Department of Fish and Wildlife activity.
Well, I'm planning to go there and start fishing, but I was a bit.
Let her rip.
I had nothing to do with it, but I was a bit curious.
Yeah, that's something that they regulate. They've done Washing Pond before as well.
Yeah.
A number of times, but yeah, if you have questions, I can definitely get you in touch with.
No, I'm probably going to turn a blind eye as I go out there.
No, or tight lines too,
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can speak here as a fisherman, but what Jeff was saying is right. If it's a freshwater area, it's Mass Wildlife, and if it's a saltwater area, it'd be marine fisheries involved as well. The Mass Wildlife should have on their website a schedule of all stocking dates and locations. So if you see something that's outside of one of those locations and dates, or you think it's just an unauthorized person releasing something, we definitely don't want people who don't have authority to be releasing non-native species or even native species into our resource areas. So you should call the environmental police if you suspect.
No sharks in Hummock Pond. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I know historically there have been a few cases of people releasing species without permission, which it is a wildlife crime. So if you see that, you should call the EPO.
Yes, that's how we ended up with koi and grass carp in my common pond.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. One was from the flooding event. The other was because someone got tired of their fish and apparently let them go. So,
Yeah.
but call the police or the environmental police if you see it happening, for sure.
Any other commissioners' comments?
Well, actually, I did get your list, and I'll get you a full report on those for the next meeting.
Okay. And definitely as soon as you could get to the 300 Pulpus, I think that would be good, because they're like, they do not understand that they do not have a permit yet.
So no, I will get out there tomorrow. So
and then I had actually two other questions. One, when I was at the beach in Surfside today, and this might be in process, the number of terns flying around, and I actually saw one piping plover, has like increased significantly from even 2 days ago. And I just wasn't sure if there was going to be bird fencing out there, because the people and the dogs, like there's a lot of traffic.
yeah, there definitely is some out there already in a few spots. We typically nest, and Mass Audubon does some of that area as well. Typically nest the area that has historically contained nests. Do you have an area?
Yeah.
On the Surfside Beach area, were you on the fisherman side or the Point of Breaker side?
So I've been walking the whole set, but this is normally fenced, like where you'd come off of the youth hostel, like those access points usually have fencing. And when I saw an actual plover on the ground today, I was like, oh, because there was someone with an off-leash dog. And
yeah, that's an area that Mass Audubon does. So I'll get in touch with Sam and Kathy Parsons and let them know that you've had a number of sightings of plovers and terns there, and we'll definitely help them get that protected if it needs to be.
Awesome, thank you. And then my third is just from earlier tonight about having a discussion about this subdivided properties within like wetland jurisdiction for a later agenda item, I guess.
Certainly, yeah, I can look into that and see if there's any guidance from elsewhere for how people have dealt with that, or maybe kind of looking at how we can approach a discussion with the planning board. Certainly.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, if I may speak to that point as well, I second your opinion that it's potentially a bad practice to be subdividing properties within resource area buffers. I guess talking to the planning board makes sense. I don't know if there's any other regulatory ways that we can prohibit that type of development if they are not inclined to agree with us, but there are things to consider. I mean, talking with the planning board is the best first step, and I think we need to think about backup ways in case they have a differing opinion as well.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely have a differing of opinion, because and Mark will speak to that, but we definitely should look at other avenues as well in case we're not on the same page. Mark, did you have a comment?
I did. Other avenues are the way to go, I think. I was on the planning board for 12 years. And one of the scams that one of the things developers would do was they would subdivide a lot that had a lot of wetlands on it and make one lot very subject to the wetlands bylaw, but then come in and claim request waivers because they had nowhere to go with a house. And the planning board said state law is that you can't prevent someone from subdividing a lot if they meet certain standards of the percent of upland and road frontage, et cetera, square feet and all that. But the upland rule can be you must have a percent of upland on your property, on your subdivision. But boy, they can make numbers really move around, as we've seen on all our boards. But it's a very troubling aspect. I know we're facing it now with this one on Washington Pond Road. It's a very troubling thing. I may require a state law change for subdivision control.
Thank you, Mark. Seth?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we could probably talk about this more when it's an agenda item, but perhaps we can have town council weigh in on this as well. If we have the ability to submit a zoning bylaw or whatever it may be. This is not my area of expertise, so it would just be good to know all the options, because my opinion and hearing from Mark, and it seems like your opinion as well, Ashley, is that they might not be that receptive of this discussion. So it's good to have some backup plans in place.
Yes, I think, on this particular one, we're talking about $12 million at stake, plus or minus. And so I would have thought talking to our state representative to try and get a change in the law at the State House might get us further than doing anything locally, especially taking your point into account, Mark.
All right. Jeff?
Yeah, I was going to say too, I mean, there may be some ideas, and I can look around a little bit, in ways to get at this through performance standards as well. I mean, there may be a way to have kind of a, if lots were subdivided after a certain date, that you could have a different set of performance standards. I don't know if anyone's tried that before. I don't know if it's legal or not, but I mean, typically for us, an alternative avenue is addressing it through our own bylaw and regulations through performance standards. So that may be an avenue that's available to you guys if the other discussion doesn't have any, doesn't bear any fruits.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark, did you have something to add?
No, it may be controllable by a zoning bylaw change, but that might be tricky too, but maybe. So it could be local law as well as state.
Jeff?
So we just had a public comment come in on this. So from Dean Atherton, she said, don't underestimate the current planning board. They might be more receptive than you think. So for what it's worth, it's like our only public comment of the night. So I wanted to at least get it in.
And it's optimistic, so we like that.
And it has no bearing on the fact that Mark is no longer on the board, right?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other commissioners' comments? All right, then we'll move on to administrator staff reports.
I got nothing. Just remember to socially distance, wear masks when you're in public, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you for all your COVID work, Jeff.
Yeah.
Working slowly but surely, or at least trying to. So, like to get back to doing my real job at some point, though. At the same time,
I'm sure you would.
I feel like we all want to be back at our real jobs in
Yes,
their real
actually,
capacities.
you and your teacher friends would be great if you could teach our children again.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm sick of this classroom. That's my house. So, all right. Well, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So by roll vote, Beal? No, you're muted.
Aye.
Engelborg?
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Nice to
Ta-ta.
meet you all.